Hi, I'm JaeWon. I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington, and I'll present our work on trust-enabled privacy on behalf of our wonderful collaborators, Robert, Ramya, Sandy, Jessica, and Alexis. So before I get started, let me clarify the scope of our project. So by trust, I'm mainly referring to interpersonal trust, the belief that others have our best interests at heart. And by social media, I'm mainly referring to broadcast-type social media, with a representative example being Instagram. So back to the actual presentation, have you ever wanted to share a random mundane moment from your life? Like, I'm wearing these cool red socks today. I'm not, but decided against it because you didn't want to be judged for oversharing or taking up too much space in other people's feeds. Sharing things on social media, especially platforms like Instagram, can feel very risky sometimes. And this hesitation to share is particularly an issue for teens who often use social media to fulfill their relational needs. Social media is central to teens' lives. Relationship building and identity development, which also happens through peer validation, are key parts of their growth. But social media, as it currently stands, doesn't seem to be doing a great job of supporting these relational needs. And a major source of disappointment is the lack of support for their privacy concerns. Relationship building starts with authentic self-disclosure. So sharing something is the smallest building block of relationship building. And contrary to common misconceptions, research has shown teens are very aware of the online privacy risks of self-disclosure. Teens' privacy concerns primarily stem from interpersonal risks, such as a friend sharing something behind their back, future employers finding posts from the past, and many more. Even when they feel their privacy is not supported, they sometimes still feel compelled to share due to their need for peer connection. In the current mainstream social media environment, the extent of teens' privacy fears has been reported to be quite severe. 28% of public Instagram owners reported dysfunctional fear around privacy risks, meaning it decreases the quality of life without leading to any constructive actions. And this kind of disempowerment can lead to withdrawal or self-censoring, not sharing, or even worse, privacy resignation and just giving up and oversharing. Perhaps all this fear and disempowerment stems from the framework for privacy that we've been using so far. Privacy in social media, especially for teens, is not solely about restricting access to personal information. It's an ongoing process of interpersonal boundary regulation. Social media privacy narratives and platform designs often frame privacy as a trade-off between disclosure and control. However, privacy as control is ineffective in a networked environment where information is co-owned. It puts the entire burden of privacy protection on individuals as a result, and it implies that sharing means giving up rights to privacy. So it encourages withdrawal from sharing and leads to users missing opportunities to connect. So our research focused on understanding how teens currently navigate self-disclosure and how platform design may support or undermine the type of disclosure they find meaningful for social connection. We conducted a 3-part study with 19 teens aged 13 through 18, involving 2 interviews and a 7-day diary study. The entry interviews was about understanding how teens engage with social media. Diary study was for a week on what they decided to share or not share and their reasons for such decisions. Afterwards, we conducted co-design interviews as exit interviews to brainstorm ways that platforms could better support comfortable and meaningful self-disclosure online. So we came up with these 8 design ideas. I won't share them all, but so the first research question we explored was, how do teens navigate self-disclosure within social media environments, and what factors influence their decisions to share? We first learned that teens wish to share small personal moments that could lead to meaningful connections. An example being, I want to be able to just share some of the more mundane details of my personal life, you know. Like yesterday, I was really happy because I made some microwave popcorn, and at the end, there were only 11 unpopped kernels at the bottom of the bag. Just little things like that. Very cute. And teens saw that trust and self-disclosure are deeply intertwined bidirectionally. One participant said, "For me, building trust looks like getting to post what you like and maybe having a small 2-minute conversation about it. Trust is a mutual thing. If you reply more to me, and I'll talk to you more. That builds trust because we get to know each other more." Now let's look at the second research question. How does social media design, support, or undermine trust-based self-disclosure among teens? Our study introduces 2 major barriers to trust building disclosure among teens. The first is communication fog, which refers to ambiguous norms and audiences, among other things. The second is what we call low-grace culture, a high-stakes environment that tends to skew these uncertainties towards negative interpretations. Now let's look at an example of communication fog. I won't go into the details for each, but the first one within communication fog is ambiguous norms, which can create uncertainty about what and how much to share. Teens make sense of ambiguous norms by observing other users' behaviors, and they often use peers as their reference points. As one said, oftentimes I kind of match what my friends post. On Instagram, not famous people, in my experience, do not normally post random stuff like this, so it would be weird to make it my first post. So Instagram requires users to make active choices about sharing, and this can lead to fears of backlash. For example, sharing being interpreted as attention-seeking rather than a bid for connection. To counter this, participants expressed wanting guided disclosure, where platforms would offer clear, explicit cues for what counts as appropriate sharing, such as expectations for how much, how often, and when to share. These prompts would reduce the burden of individual decision-making and reinforce the reciprocity of self-disclosure, reassuring users that their vulnerability is not being interpreted as an isolated attempt for attention, but rather a community or shared effort. An existing example would be platforms like BeReal, where every user is given a notification a day to do their own shout-out. Another communication fog example is ambiguous loyalty, which creates challenges in boundary regulation based on trust. Given that social media platforms often encourage expansive behaviors like adding more friends by thinking about things like follower to followee ratios, users end up with an audience they can't fully trust. So one said, you never can really know who's viewing your content or who's really following you. To mitigate these uncertainties and foster a greater sense of trust-based boundary control, participants proposed supporting mutual commitment in content consumption. This approach redistributes accountability, allowing viewers to control what they see better while relieving sharers of sole responsibility for audience reactions. Again, an existing example would be Snapchat's private story. So this participant who had a private story and shared a link on their chat or profile and had other friends opt in to join the story, said if they join that story, then they're kind of the ones subjecting themselves to it. If they didn't want to see it, they never had to join it. So it'd be weird to complain, basically. So now we'll look into examples of low-grace culture, an example of low-grace culture. So non-consensual exposure is something that makes teens fear burdening others and being judged by public standards. So on Instagram, for example, if you follow someone, you implicitly agree to seeing their content on your feed. And if you share content, you're implicitly agreeing to appear in other people's feeds. So viewers feel buried in posts, and sharers fear spamming or clogging other people's feeds. So teens thought that self-contained disclosure would allow them to share without imposing their content on others. An example of such unobtrusive communication would be a little status update. We introduced trust-enabled privacy as a framework that recognizes trust, whether building or eroding, as central to social media boundary regulation. So platform design shapes platform norms. Platform norms drive trust calibration. Trust calibration dictates boundary regulation decision. Boundary regulation decisions will affect social outcomes. Social outcomes will feed back into trust calibration. And the loop of trust either building or eroding will continue based on how the platform is designed. So to sum, teens want to share small everyday moments to build trust and connection, but face high emotional stakes due to ambiguous social norms and environments that often feel judgmental or unforgiving. We introduced 8 design ideas to counter these barriers and build trust. Also, building on frameworks like privacy as trust, we challenge the assumption that privacy and sharing are a trade-off. Our approach calls for platform designs that intentionally cultivate trust, making privacy and sharing mutually reinforcing and expanding the frontier of the interactions that are safely possible on these platforms. These are the key takeaways in case anyone wants to look back through the slides. To wrap up, I want to leave you with a broader question. What does a better social media environment for kids look like? When we imagine the kind of world we want kids to grow up in, of course protection and reducing negativity matter. But that's not the whole picture. Teens also need genuine connections and trusting relationships. It's worth remembering that the absence of negativity isn't the same as the presence of positivity. We need to think about how we can be intentional and proactive in creating positive experiences rather than just reacting to harm by preventing or fixing it, and make sure we're not taking away the very opportunities that can help teens thrive. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to our anonymous reviewers and participants for helping make this work possible. I'm happy to take any questions.